How's it going, everybody? Just before I get into the video, I just wanted to announce that I've written my first ever book, Unboxing History's Greatest Fighters of All Time. In order to get your copy and learn about the standout fighters in history, just follow the link in the description below. But now, let's get on to the Will-o'-the-Wisp, Willie Pep. There has never been a fighter that has maintained such a high level winning consistency over the amount of fights at the top level that the great Willie Pep did. The Will-o'-the-Wisp is boxing's greatest ever defensive fighter and one of the most versatile fighters the sport's ever produced. Pep compiled undefeated streaks far beyond modern comprehension in one of the sport's toughest eras, overcoming some of the most severe adversity any fighter in history's ever had to. Pep was so good, there's even a myth that he won a round without even throwing a punch, solely on ring IQ. He's often revered as a legend, but there's very little out there describing what made Willie Pep potentially the greatest boxer to ever live. So here, we're going to deep dive into the great career of the Will-o'-the-Wisp, the great Willie Pep. In 1942, at just 20 years of age, Willie Pep became the featherweight champion of the world, a division he ruled over for most of the decade. Having defeated Joey Archibald multiple times on his way to the title, Pep outpointed the Hall of Fame champion Chalky Wright to win the crown, improving his record to an impeccable 54-0. That unbeaten streak was eventually extended to 62-0 before losing to the Hall of Fame Sammy Angot in a non-title fight. Pep ultimately responded by winning 72 straight fights on the bounce. He defended his title against featherweight world champion Sal Bartolo, whilst also scoring notable victories over Chalky Wright, Willie Joyce and Jackie Wilson, before stepping in with the great bantamweight champion Manuel Ortiz. Similarly to Pep, Ortiz was champion at bantamweight for much of the 1940s and is one of the all-time great forgotten American fighters. When Ortiz, one of boxing's longest reigning champions in any division, stepped up to featherweight to challenge Pep, a former sparring partner of Ortiz, won the fight easily. Across these years, the likes of Sal Bartolo, Jackie Wilson and Chalky Wright were all defeated again, whilst notable contender after contender failed to lay a glove on Pep's elusive frame. In his infamous fight against Jackie Graves, Bert Sugar tells the story of how Willie Pep supposedly won a round without even throwing a punch.
Pep had told all the ringside writers, watch me in the third round. I'm going to win the round, and I'm not going to throw a punch. And guess what? He'd move in, he'd fake a punch, he'd grab him, he'd spin him, he'd move out. He'd begin a punch, he'd pull it back. He'd block a punch, he'd move under. And on 2 of the 3 scorecards, without having thrown a punch in the round, he won the round.
Pep was involved in a devastating plane crash that killed many on board just months after his masterclass against Graves. The injuries he suffered on board were severe, placing him in a full body cast, with doctors suggesting he was never going to box again. But Pep, in his absolute prime at this time, was determined to return and even passed on a $500,000 settlement to get back to the ring. Within just a staggering 5-month window after a devastating plane crash, Pep returned to the ring and outpointed Victor Flores in a brilliant performance. It was one of the early signs that boxing's most elusive master also possessed unmatched grit. Amazingly, having been told he'd never even box again, he would step into the ring 131 more times across 20 years. The tale of Pep's recovery is jaw-dropping on its own, but when you consider the absolute freakish numbers he was compiling in the ring, it makes it completely unbelievable. At the time of the crash, his record was 108 wins to just 1 defeat and 1 draw, with 37 knockouts. Considering he was featherweight champion of the world, he had consistently been fighting top opposition and beaten them multiple times. He had emerged victorious across his first 62 professional fights and then overshadowed that streak by going undefeated across a straight 72 fights, surviving a devastating plane crash and boxing just 5 months after. The 72 fight undefeated streak stretched from 1943 to 1948, meaning that having returned just 5 months after the crash, he won 26 fights in a row. And having achieved all of this by the age of 26, he was still yet to pull off his greatest masterclass and meet his most ferocious rival. Pep, whose record now was an astonishing 134 wins to just 1 defeat and 1 draw, was set to defend his titles against Sandy Sadler. Sadler was an absolute monster of a featherweight, towering over opposition and owning a freakishly long reach. Yet, he never tended to use that height advantage to stay out of danger, instead marauding forward and bulldozing outsized opponents, a style which in itself accumulated 104 knockouts across 145 career victories. Sadler's ferocious power and roughhouse style was bound to give a fighter like Pep trouble, And when the pair met for the first time in 1948, the inevitable clash of styles spelled disaster for Pep. Sadler destroyed Pep in their first fight, dropping him multiple times en route to a 4th round TKO victory. The near unprecedented reign of dominance that Pep had achieved across the 1940s was ended suddenly and violently. But for boxing's most graceful fighter, who had already overcome severe adversity, this setback set the stage for his second major comeback. The second fight against Sadler is Pep's career opus, the most impeccable performance he ever produced in a career full of masterclasses. Unfortunately, there's no footage of the second fight against Sadler. Pep came out like a man on a mission, landing 37 jabs in the first round alone and countering every barrage his overpowering aggressive opponent threw at him. Whilst the massive champion remained undeterred and kept pressing Pep, Pep kept working backwards, building a lead on the scorecards. The pressure began to put a dent in Pep, opening a cut on his cheek, but the challenger stayed firm and stuck to the game plan over a grueling 15 rounds. When the decision was announced, Pep became only the second man in featherweight history to reclaim the title, defeating one of the most fearsome featherweights ever seen. Pep and Sadler would ultimately engage in a 4-fight saga, with Sadler winning 3 times out of 4. Ultimately, his style was just far too much for a fighter like Pep. However, it allowed Pep to show just how great he was against all of the odds and provide his career masterclass. Sadler's menacing presence over the featherweight division prevented Pep from ever being a champion again. But before losing the third fight to Sadler, Pep went on a 20-fight win streak, defeating the bantamweight champion Harold Dade and Hall of Famer Charlie Riley. He continued to fight for another 16 years, whilst not maintaining the levels of perfection he had accumulated between 1940 to 1948, he still displayed a consistency less than a handful of fighters have ever mimicked. Pep was one of the craftiest fighters ever, blessed with immaculate footwork, a seamless ability to switch hit, and the hardest fighter to ever hit clean. The sharpness of mind you see of Willie Pep in his interviews of an old man is a testament to his defensive mastery. He eventually retired with a record of 229 victories to just 11 defeats and 1 draw with 65 knockouts.
You had 54 wins and no losses.
62 in a row, and then
62,
I got beat.
okay. 60
Then I got the 63rd. I got beat by the lightweight champion of the world. I fought out of my class. Then I won 73 in a row.
Jeez. Okay.
I won the championship of the world, my 54th straight win.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right.
And you fought Chalky White.
Chalky White,
Can you tell me about the Chalky White fight?
Well, he was a great champion. He knocked everybody out, but you know, if he don't hit you, he ain't gonna knock you out. So I made sure he didn't hit me. I boxed him for 15 rounds, and he didn't, as long as I didn't get hit, I didn't get hurt. So I won the fight.
Like I say, now you've had so many. I think you hold. Like I say, you hold a record.
229 wins. Nobody ever won more fights in the history of boxing.
And in doing so, you've had many successful title defenses.
Oh, I defended the title about 11 times, off and on.
Off and on. And look over my research. On January 8th, 1947, you had a very serious accident.
I cracked up with a plane. I was champion of the world at the time. I was flying up from down south. I was in Miami. I was coming up to Connecticut. I cracked up in New Jersey. I was off 6 months. But they told me I broke my back and broke my leg. And they said, Willie, you won't be fighting for a long while. 6 months later, I was boxing. I got very lucky. I did well, and I was on my way again. But I wasn't supposed to fight ever again.